It was a Thursday night in 1986. The Tonight Show was live, and millions of Americans were watching from their living rooms. Johnny Carson sat behind his desk, smiling as an 8-year-old girl named Lily walked toward the grand piano on stage. She wore a simple blue dress, her blonde hair tied back with a ribbon. In her small hands, she carried the weight of a dream that had traveled all the way from a tiny town in Nebraska. The audience applauded warmly. Lily sat down at the piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. The melody was beautiful, haunting. It filled the studio with a kind of magic that made the people stop and listen. Johnny leaned forward in his chair, watching her with soft eyes. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Then something changed. Lily's fingers began to slow. She blinked once, twice. Her small body swayed on the bench. The audience grew quiet. Before anyone could react, she slipped sideways and collapsed onto the stage floor. Gasps filled the studio. The cameras kept rolling. Johnny bolted from his desk and rushed to her side. He knelt down, cradled her head gently, and called for help. His voice was calm, but his face showed something deeper: fear, concern, and something else, a determination that would define the next 72 hours of his life. What Johnny Carson did next would change this little girl's life forever, and it would leave all of America in tears. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. Earlier that same day, Johnny Carson arrived at NBC Studios in Burbank. The California sun was bright, but Johnny's mood was quiet. He had been hosting The Tonight Show for over 2 decades, and some days felt routine. But today felt different. He couldn't explain why. As he walked toward his dressing room, a production assistant handed him a thin folder. It contained the information about the guests appearing that night. Johnny flipped through the pages until one caught his attention. It was a young talent segment, an 8-year-old piano player named Lily Martin from a small town in Nebraska. Johnny paused. Nebraska! His home state! The place where he had grown up poor, dreaming of something bigger. He read further. Lily's father had died 2 years earlier in a factory accident. Her mother, Karen, worked double shifts at a local diner just to keep the lights on. They had no family nearby, no savings, no safety net. Lily had taught herself to play piano using her father's old keyboard, the only thing he had left behind. The Tonight Show appearance was their one chance. Karen had saved for months just to afford the bus tickets to California. For Lily, this wasn't just a performance. It was a promise she had made to her father before he died. Johnny closed the folder slowly. Something stirred inside him. He had seen hundreds of young performers over the years, but this one felt different. Maybe it was the Nebraska connection. Maybe it was the story of a little girl holding on to her father's dream. Whatever it was, Johnny made a decision. He would meet Lily before the show. He had no idea how much this little girl would need him before the night was over. Johnny found Lily backstage, sitting in a folding chair near the curtain. Her legs dangled above the floor, too short to reach. In her hands, she clutched a small photograph. Her mother, Karen, stood nearby, adjusting Lily's ribbon with tired but loving hands. Johnny approached slowly. He didn't want to overwhelm her. When Lily looked up and saw him, her eyes went wide. "Mr. Carson," she whispered. Johnny smiled and crouched down to her level. "You must be Lily. I heard you're going to play something special for us tonight." Lily nodded shyly. She glanced down at the photograph in her hands. "Who's that?" Johnny asked gently. "My daddy," Lily said. He taught me my first song. He said if I played good enough, someday I'd be on TV. She paused. He's not here anymore, but I think he's watching. Johnny's expression softened. He looked at the photograph. A man with kind eyes and a warm smile, his arm around a younger Lily. The resemblance was clear. I think he's watching too, Johnny said quietly. And I think he's very proud of you. Lily looked up at him, her eyes hopeful. Will you watch me play, Mr. Carson? Johnny placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I'll be right there, I promise. From the corner, Karen watched the exchange. Her eyes glistened with tears she was trying hard to hold back. She wore a simple dress, slightly faded. Dark circles under her eyes told the story of sleepless nights and endless worry. When Johnny stood and walked toward her, she straightened nervously. She's a special girl, Johnny said. Karen nodded, her voice breaking slightly. She's all I have left. This means everything to her. Johnny looked at Karen for a long moment. He recognized that look. The look of a parent carrying more weight than anyone should have to carry alone. He didn't say much, just nodded, but something unspoken passed between them. Minutes later, the show began. The band played, the audience cheered, and a little girl in a blue dress walked toward the grand piano, carrying her father's dream in her heart. Johnny watched from his desk, keeping his promise. He had no idea what was about to happen. Lily sat at the piano, her small fingers resting on the keys. The studio lights were bright, but she didn't seem to notice. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering courage from somewhere deep inside. Then she began to play. The melody was soft at first, gentle. It floated through the studio like a memory. The audience fell silent, captivated by the sound coming from such a small girl. Johnny watched from his desk, his chin resting on his hand. There was something about this song, something that felt personal, sacred. Lily played with her whole heart. Her fingers moved across the keys with a grace that seemed beyond her years. This was her father's favorite song, the one he used to hum while making breakfast, the one he taught her on that old keyboard in their tiny living room. Every note carried his memory. For 2 minutes, everything was perfect. Then Lily's fingers began to slow. Her right hand hesitated on a key. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to clear her vision. Johnny noticed immediately. He sat up straighter, his eyes fixed on her. Lily swayed slightly on the bench. Her left hand dropped from the keys. The music stopped. The audience held their breath. Then she collapsed. Her small body slipped sideways off the bench and onto the stage floor. The sound of gasps filled the studio. Someone screamed. Karen rushed from backstage, her face pale with terror. But Johnny was faster. He jumped from his desk and ran to Lily's side. He knelt beside her, carefully lifting her head onto his lap. Her eyes were closed. Her face was pale. But she was breathing. "Call an ambulance," Johnny said firmly to the crew. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled slightly. He looked down at Lily and whispered, "Stay with me, sweetheart. You're going to be okay." Karen reached them seconds later, falling to her knees beside her daughter. Tears streamed down her face. She grabbed Lily's hand and held it tight. "What happened?" she cried. "What's wrong with her?" Johnny didn't have answers, but he stayed right there, holding Lily's head, keeping her still until the paramedics arrived. The cameras had stopped rolling. The audience sat in stunned silence. For once, the Tonight Show had no jokes, no music, just a little girl fighting for her life on a cold stage floor. The paramedics rushed in and placed Lily on a stretcher. Karen climbed into the ambulance with her, never letting go of her daughter's hand. As they drove away, Johnny stood alone on the stage, staring at the empty piano bench. He made a decision right there. He cancelled the rest of the show. In over 20 years of hosting, he had never done that. But tonight was different. Tonight, nothing else mattered. Johnny drove to the hospital himself. He didn't call his assistant. He didn't wait for his driver. He just got in his car and went. When he arrived, he found Karen in the waiting room, sitting alone on a plastic chair. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were red. She looked up when Johnny walked in, surprised to see him. "Mr. Carson, what are you doing here?" Johnny sat down beside her. "I made a promise," he said quietly. "I told her I'd be right there." They waited together in silence. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a doctor emerged from the double doors. His expression was serious. "Mrs. Martin!" Karen stood up quickly, her body tense with fear. Johnny stood beside her. The doctor spoke carefully. "Your daughter is stable now, but we found something during the examination. Lily has a congenital heart condition. It's been there since birth, but it was never diagnosed." Karen's face went white. "What does that mean?" "It means her heart isn't working the way it should," the doctor explained. "She needs surgery. Without it, her condition will only get worse." Karen's legs seemed to give out. She sank back into the chair, her hands covering her face. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I couldn't afford the checkups. I didn't know." Johnny felt a weight settle in his chest. He looked at the doctor. "How much does the surgery cost?" The doctor hesitated. "Around $80,000. The number hung in the air like a wall. Karen let out a sob. $80,000. She didn't have $80 to spare. Everything she earned went to rent, food, and keeping Lily in school. This was impossible. Johnny sat down beside Karen again. He didn't say anything at first. He just let her cry. Then, slowly, he reached over and took her hand. "She's going to get that surgery," he said. Karen looked at him, her eyes filled with disbelief. "How? I can't afford it. I don't have anyone to help. I don't know what to do." Johnny's voice was steady. "Because I'm going to make sure of it. I don't know how yet, but that little girl is not going to suffer because of money, not while I'm here." Karen stared at him. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time in years, someone was standing beside her. Someone was telling her she didn't have to carry this alone. Johnny squeezed her hand gently. "We're going to figure this out, together." In that cold hospital waiting room, something shifted. A promise was made, and Johnny Carson was not a man who broke his promises. Johnny didn't sleep that night. He sat in his home office making phone calls until the early hours of the morning. He called NBC executives. He called doctors. He called old friends who worked in medicine. By sunrise, he had a plan. The next evening, Johnny returned to the Tonight Show. But this episode would be different. There were no comedy bits, no celebrity interviews. Instead, Johnny sat behind his desk and spoke directly to the camera. Directly to America. "Last night, something happened on this stage that I will never forget," he began. His voice was calm but serious. "A little girl named Lily collapsed right here, in front of all of you. She's 8 years old. She came all the way from Nebraska with her mother just to play the piano, just to keep a promise she made to her father before he passed away." Johnny paused. The studio was completely silent. "Lily has a heart condition that nobody knew about. She needs surgery to survive, and that surgery costs $80,000. He looked straight into the camera. "Her mother works double shifts at a diner. She's done everything a parent can do, but $80,000 is more than she'll ever be able to save. And I'm not going to let that stop Lily from getting the help she needs." Johnny took a breath. I'm personally covering half of that cost, $40,000, tonight. The audience gasped softly. Johnny continued, "But I'm asking you, all of you watching at home, if this little girl touched your heart the way she touched mine, please help. Every dollar matters. Every single one." A phone number appeared on the screen. Within minutes, the lines were flooded. Operators couldn't keep up with the calls. Donations came from everywhere. Factory workers in Ohio, teachers in Texas, retired couples in Florida. Strangers who had never met Lily but couldn't stop thinking about her. By midnight, they had reached $80,000. By the next morning, the total had climbed even higher. 100,000, then 150,000. America had answered. Johnny visited Lily at the hospital the day before her surgery. She was awake now, but weak. Her face was pale against the white hospital pillow. Karen sat beside her, holding her hand. When Johnny walked in, Lily's eyes lit up. "Mr. Carson," she whispered, "you came back." Johnny smiled and pulled a small box from his coat pocket. "I brought you something." He handed her the box. Lily opened it slowly. Inside was a tiny grand piano music box. When she wound it up, it played a soft melody. "So you can practice even when you're resting," Johnny said with a gentle smile. Lily held the music box close to her chest. Then she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Will you be here when I wake up after the surgery?" Johnny sat on the edge of her bed. He took her small hand in his. "I'll be right here. I promised, didn't I?" Lily nodded. A small smile crossed her face. For the first time since the collapse, she looked peaceful. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning at UCLA Medical Center. The best pediatric heart surgeon in California would perform the operation. Everything was in place. That morning, Karen and Johnny sat together in the waiting room. Neither of them spoke much. There wasn't much to say. They just waited. The surgery took 6 hours. 6 hours of silence. 6 hours of prayers. 6 hours of hoping. Finally, the doors opened. The surgeon walked out, still in his scrubs. Karen stood up immediately, her whole body shaking. Johnny stood beside her. The surgeon looked at them both. Then he smiled. "She made it," he said. "The surgery was successful. Lily is going to be okay." Karen let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Her knees buckled, and Johnny caught her, holding her steady. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Thank you," over and over again. Johnny's own eyes were wet. He blinked hard and looked toward the ceiling. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "She's got a lot more songs to play." 6 months passed. Lily recovered fully. The scar on her chest faded slowly, but her spirit grew stronger every day. She returned to schools. She practiced piano every morning before class, and she never let go of the little music box Johnny had given her. Then, one evening, the phone rang at Karen's apartment. It was a producer from The Tonight Show. Johnny wanted Lily to come back, not as a guest, as a performer. He wanted her to finish what she had started. 2 weeks later, Lily walked onto that same stage again. She wore a new dress this time, light pink with small white flowers. Her hair was longer now, tied back with the same ribbon she had worn before. In the audience, Karen sat in the front row, clutching a tissue in her hands. When Lily appeared, the audience rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous. People were cheering before she even touched the piano. Some were already crying. Lily sat down at the bench. She placed her fingers on the keys. The studio grew silent. Then she began to play. It was the same song, her father's song. the one she never got to finish. But this time her fingers did not slow, her body did not sway. She played every note with confidence, with strength, with love. The melody filled the studio. It floated through the air like something sacred. Johnny watched from his desk, his eyes glistening. He didn't try to hide it. When the final note rang out, he was the first to stand. The audience followed, applauding and crying at the same time. Lily stood up from the bench and took a small bow. Then she looked at Johnny. He walked over to her, knelt down, and hugged her gently. "You did it," he whispered. "Your daddy would be so proud." After the applause faded, Johnny had one more surprise. He reached behind his desk and pulled out an envelope. "Lily," he said, "I have something for you." He handed her the envelope. She opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, an acceptance letter, to Juilliard's youth music program, a full scholarship. Lily's eyes went wide. She looked at Johnny, then at her mother in the audience. Karen had both hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "You earned this," Johnny said. "Every note, every hour of practice. This is your future." Lily hugged him again, tighter this time. The audience cheered. But the story didn't end there. The donations from Johnny's original broadcast had far exceeded what Lily needed. The final total reached over $200,000. Johnny worked with Karen and a team of doctors to create something lasting. They established a foundation in Lily's name. It would help other children with heart conditions whose families couldn't afford treatment. What began as one little girl's dream became a lifeline for hundreds of others. Years later, a reporter asked Johnny Carson about his favorite moment on The Tonight Show. He had hosted thousands of episodes, interviewed presidents, made millions laugh. But his answer surprised everyone. "The night that little girl collapsed," he said, "that's when I understood why I was given this platform." He paused and added, "It was never about the applause. It was about showing up when someone needs you." Johnny kept drawing in his dressing room until his very last show. It was a picture Lily had made for him. A simple crayon drawing of a tall man and a small girl holding hands next to a piano. At the top, in messy letters, she had written two words, "My hero." Karen never forgot what Johnny did for them. In an interview years later, she said, "He didn't just save her life, he gave her back her father's dream." And Lily, she grew up to become a music teacher. She moved back to Nebraska and opened a small studio where she taught piano to children who couldn't afford lessons. Every student who walked through her door heard the same words Johnny once said to her, "I'll be right here." The night Lily collapsed, America watched a legend become something more than an entertainer. They watched him become human. They watched him stop everything for one child. And in doing so, he reminded millions of people of a simple truth. Sometimes the greatest shows aren't the ones we plan. They're the ones that demand we become more than performers. They demand we become present. They demand we care. And in that moment, Johnny Carson reminded us all, even in the brightest spotlights, the truest light comes from compassion. It comes from showing up. It comes from keeping your promises. Even in the darkest moments, there is always light, often from the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.